facilities and equipments. Thank you po.
Okay, Mr. Ding Diaz.
Hanggang sa huli, hindi po mawawala ang aking pagtitiwala sa kakayahan ng mga Pilipino. Kung nagkakaroon man po ng kakulangan, kaya po sa mga international standards ay hindi po pumapasa ang ating training, ang pwede ko pong sisihin dito ay ang mga nagre-regulate ng industriya po nito. O yung pong sinabi nga po ninyo, yung marina. I would agree, again, it goes back to education. Even training goes to education. And kahit na po anong ganda naman ng education po natin, if there are no proper facilities that would aid them in their training, wala pong mangyayari po dito. Again, I would like to say, hindi lamang ho sa mga seafarers, kung hindi sa lahat po ng ating mga kababayan na naghahangad ng magandang kinabukasan. Kaya po natin mag-excel, kaya po nating umangat sa ating pamumuhay. Ang kailangan po lamang natin tamang suporta ng mga namumuno sa ating bayan.
Okay, Yusek Pimentel.
The Filipino seafarers are the #1 competition of European seafarers. Itong move ng Europe to blacklist the Filipinos sa seafaring industry is not just a political but also an economic move. Huwag nating bigyan ng pagkakataon ang mga European to blacklist the Philippines because we know that around the world, it is the Filipinos that is very highly required ang kanilang mga trabaho. Even the seafarers, we have so many seafarers that have excelled. That is why all the shipping industries in the world are taking the Filipinos. In fact, the Europeans, during my term in the Commission on Filipinos Overseas, came to the Philippines to study the seafaring industry of the Philippines. Thank you.
Thank you. And Secretary Manny Piñol.
The huge demand for Filipino seafarers actually resulted in the mushrooming of so many maritime schools, fly-by-night yung iba, and that actually resulted in the deterioration of the standards. Now, the thing that should be done here is first audit and evaluate existing schools, and then come up with a refresher course which would be compliant to the European Union standards. Wala tayong magagawa dahil sila nag-employ. We have to come up with refresher courses that would be compliant to EU protocols on maritime services. And yung mga hindi papasa, then we will have to provide them with livelihood opportunities. We don't even have to enact the legislation to do this.
Thank you, Secretary. I think one of the issues is that there's confusion on which agency is responsible. I think for a time, this was being tossed between Marina and the Commission on Higher Education. I think DepEd is not part of the situation here, but there are even some complaints among schools that even the regulations or policies change over time. I heard one school invested millions of pesos in a simulator because they were required to do so, only to find out later when policies change that simulators are no longer required. My question is, what laws, what bills will you introduce in the Senate to address the situation?
Go ahead, ma'am.
Isa sa mga dapat nating ipasa is that the requirement for maritime institutions to have a facility for the training. Kasi marami tayong schools, maritime industry institutions na walang facility to train. In fact, there should be partnership between the government, the maritime institution, and the foreign agency or the foreign company to bring in a ship that is world-class for the training of our seafarers.
Okay, any follow-up?
I think that's one of the problems. And ironically, the Philippines is a maritime country.
Yes.
Testified by the fact that we man most of the world's vessels, except that our maritime industries are underdeveloped relative to other countries. In fact, one of the criticisms in the Philippines is that we have one of the worst maritime safety records in the world. So maybe I'd like to hear what laws you would like to propose in the Senate to remedy this problem.
Okay, let's get specific for the laws. Go ahead.
We could remedy this by having a law on because this is about education. sa ating maritime industry. There are a lot of foreign governments that are willing to send in their teachers in the maritime industry. That's a partnership that we should build on as well.
Go ahead, Mr. Belchica.
The problem with the maritime industry is nag-pop up nga ho yung mga eskwelahan na hindi naman nagdi-deliver ng tamang pag-aaral, pinagkapirahan yung mga seaman. So this is an opportunity. This is the right time for government to put up schools that will put up the right standards and get the right professors and trainers to train these seamen. Dahil po, ang nirireklamo di ba mga seaman, yung mga nagtuturo daw sa kanila, hindi pa raw nakatapak ng barko. So, that's a problem why the Philippines has went down its quality.
Okay. Go ahead, Secretary Pinyo.
Ang una dapat na i-resolve siguro is saan ba dapat yung ating maritime schools? Should it be with SED or Marina? Number two, kung gagawa man tayo ng batas, dapat yung batas na yun na magsiset ng standards for allowing a school to operate as a maritime school.
Thank you. Dr. Padilla?
Yeah, basically, kailangan ng Maritime Standardization Education Act. Parang ganon, no? Para standardize lahat. Like nangyari noon sa mga nurses, nag-crop up yung mga mushrooming of nursing schools sa puro substandard kasi maraming kailangan ng nurse. Same thing happened here. We have to have standards. Tapos yung permits, very strict sa permits. Kasi doon din nagkakaroon ng problema. So, Standardization Act for Maritime Education and stricter tayo sa giving permits. And that includes, the standardization includes everything.
Thank you.
One of the complaints po of the private education sector is that there is too much regulation. In fact, a lot of them are complaining that even as there are measures in government, for example, raising the salary of teachers, it only applies to those working in the public education system, but not to those in private. So it results in an uneven playing field. For those who are espousing free education, right? What do we do about the private education or private maritime schools that have invested private capital for a public good?
Go ahead, Mr. Marcoleta.
I think the oversight function of Senate should be strengthened along that line, Doctor, because these too much regulations must be studied, and Congress, I think, is in a position, particularly the Senate, to look into which regulations are harming the particular interest or the concerns of these maritime schools. Let us also accredit the schools. There should be a legislative action to accredit the schools so that masiguro po natin ang skills and standards na kinakailangan po para maproteksyonan ang ating mga seafarers.
By the way, thank you, Deputy Speaker. I'm not yet a doctor, pero sinusulat ko na po ang dissertation ko. Malapit na po, but thank you for the promotion po.
Mr. Am. Okay, let's hear from Secretary Belhica.
The tuition fee voucher fund po ang aking pinopropose dyan, where the students will choose which school he wants to go to. So meron siyang voucher na dadalhin sa kahit anong eskwelahan na gusto niyang puntahan para siya po mamimili ng pinakamahusay na eskwelahan na the least cost, instead of having the scholarship program na binibigay mo po sa eskwelahan and then yung students. This way, we will get the best schools giving the best services at the least cost na choice ng estudyante.
Okay, I saw your hand, Ms. Kiram. Go ahead.
Yes. Hello. Dahil sa too much regulation, siguro mas maganda kung magkakaroon ng monitoring side dito sa national. Kasi pag minsan, dahil sa backing system, kung halimbawa mataas yung position ng nasa nakakapasok. So yung standardization is bumababa. Siguro mas maganda yung may monitoring talaga dito sa sa national.
Okay, Mr. Aranza.
Hindi lang ho sa standard. Yan ay maganda, pero kailangan din i-screen natin ang mga papasok. Sa Philippine Airlines, out of 1,500 na nagpasok sa non-paying, only 15 ang kinuha. 1 month ang examination every other day. So, ganun din dapat because alam mo mas mahirap daw ang barko iliko kaysa sa aeroplano. Ano yan? Milya-milyahe ka bago ka makaliko. Kaya tandaan nyo, mas mahirap. Practical. Totoo yan.
Thank you. Secretary Panelo.
Babalikan ko po yung original na proposal ko na isang legislation na lumika ng free school for seafarers na kukuha tayo ng mga eksperto para matuto itong mga kababayan natin. Pangalawa, alam po ninyo, kailangan libre para magkaroon ng kompetensya dito sa mga private schools para i-improve nila. Pag nakita nila na itong libre, mas okay pala. I-upgrade nila mga sarili nila.
Actually, Asik Pimentel mentioned something very interesting, and I find it ironic that we have the best seafarers in the world, except that most of them are working abroad. And that, I think, is a testament to the state of our maritime industries. And I was wondering if you have any bills in mind that will help strengthen the maritime industries.
He asked Secretary Bellica, and then we go to Senator Honasan.
Yeah, yun nga po ang problema. Meron tayong mga libre, pero libreng bulok. Na mga libreng eskwelahan, pero wala namang gamit, wala namang teacher. Kaya nga po, babaligtarin natin sa sitwasyon. If you have a tuition fee voucher fund, then the student can choose the best school for the least cost. So mga eskwelahan will raise their standards according to mga kinakailangan ng mga estudyante to deliver the services or to deliver the education that they need.
Okay, Senator Honasan.
Dr. Klink, a maritime industry inventory and performance audit bill is in order. It must also occupy, our seafarers must occupy a precise location in our national order of priorities. This goes beyond education. There is the funding requirement. Pero once we determine kung nasaan yung seafarers natin, automatic na yung funding. Ibig sabihin, ito lang ang pera natin, ito ang unahin natin. What is their contribution to our GDP? The domestic maritime industry. What is the contribution of the overseas seafarers to our GDP?
It's about 10% of GDP.
That should be the basis.
Total remittances.
Yes, Doctor, that should be the basis for any legislation or executive action.
Senator JV, you're... Oh, go ahead. Mr. Marcoleta? Oh.
Dr. Padilla, kanina po may sinabi kayo na legislation ang sagot dito. Pero yung sa tanong po ni Dr. Ang kanina is there is an imminent danger talaga na kailangan talagang ayusin na sapagkat kapag hindi natin na-address ito, kawawa po yung mga seafarers na talagang matatanggal at pati kanilang pamilya. Alam naman po natin ang legislation magtatagal. Ano po yung, bukod sa legislation, ano po yung ibig niyong sabihin na para ma-address natin ito?
Dr. Padilla.
Ano po, kung kailangan mabilis ho, pwede mag-EO, no? But ang dami mga private schools naman who have better facilities. But they're languishing. Tanong nyo rin yun, no?
Hindi po. Ang EO po kasi ay executive department po yun. Ang pinag-uusapan po natin kung sakaling nasa Senado tayo.
Legislation ho tayo or oversight
kaya
muna.
Kaya nga po, ang legislation po magtatagal. Pinakamadali lamang po dyan yung first reading. Pero pagdating mo sa second and third reading, kung nasa mababa kang kapulungan, pupunta sa Senado, magtatagal kayo
Kung
yan.
declared as urgent, di ba, priority bill, mabilis siya. It will also depend on the executive, di ba? It will also depend on the executive. But can I finish what I was saying? Can I say something about the public-private partnership? Because even sa other schools, the public schools, the private school owners are languishing. Nagko-complain sila, nahulugi sila, wala silang suporta. Maybe a partnership can do. So kung meron na silang equipment, magagamit sila ng mga public. So at least, magtutulungan sila. And you don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Okay, just a reminder that we should let every candidate finish their time before we continue. Okay, go ahead, Mr. Ranza.
Yung tanong ni Mr. Ang kung paano mapaigting ang negosyo ng vessel. Siguro, sa ngayon, mayroon ng bagong 7 ports na nagawa ang San Miguel. Siguro, pwede naman yung foreign vessels, pag dumating, i-unload nila so that the vessels in the Philippines will be one to carry. That way, we can also prevent smuggling. So, marami yung bagay na po pwede. Pero yung sinasabi kong smuggling ko, natabo kayo, ang eroplano pwedeng lumiko kagad. Ang vessel, milya, bago siya unti-unting lumiliko. Meski magtanong po kayo sa mga maritime.
Hey. Are we satisfied?
Well, last year po, the Philippines was assigned as the ASEAN country representative to the European Union. This is a 3-year assignment po from ASEAN. What posture po ba would you recommend that the Philippines could take with regard po to the EMSA regulation and the improvement po of domestic standards in maritime schools?
Who would like to answer that?
May I?
The question.
Secretary?
Actually, yung compliance sa EU protocols, hindi lang confined sa maritime. When I was with the DA actually, tinututukan ng EU yung compliance natin sa illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing. No? And ang threat was that kapag tinuloy nyo yan, we will ban. The same thing, the same story here. Now, I will agree with Dr. Padilla. Kung mabagal yung legislation, then let's ask the next president to issue an executive order directing Marina to conduct an upgrading of the skills and the training of our maritime people.
Thank you. Anyone would like? Okay, go ahead. Congressman Marcoleta.
Given my experience in the House of Representatives, kahit na po certified yung bill, talagang magtatagal pa rin po yan because it has to go to the process. Pupunta sa committee, magkakaroon pa ng TWG, pupunta ngayon sa plenary, magdidebate ng napakaraming panahon, hanggang sa mag-second reading and third reading, hanggang sa dumating po sa Senado, kung wala nang BICAM, baka sakali po. But the question is very imminent po eh. Merong threat talaga na mawala. Ang iniisip ko sanang isasagot nila po ay gamitin ng oversight function. Tawagin lahat ang mga responsible offices para gawan ng paraan kagad.
Thank you, Dr. Padilla and Secretary Panelo.
No, actually, Congressman Marcoleta, sinabi na naman yung kaninang oversight function sa mga nangyayari ngayon. No? Pero bukod ho doon, siguro kung magaling ang ating next president, ay makikita niya yung urgency. Pwede siya mag-EO na, executive order. Bakit ka pa mag-oversight? Hearing pa rin ho yun. Diba?
Magaling talaga po yung susunod na president.
Okay, thank
Dapat
you.
magaling yung susunod na presidente.
Okay, Secretary Panelo.
Iniisip ko, balikan natin yung kanina na nabanggit dito na maraming problema din yung mga private training school. Aba, di kung may problema sila sa pondo, ay bigyan natin ng pondo. And then, gawin natin stricto ang paggamit ng pondo. May mga requirements tayo. Kailangan maging compliant sila. Para nakakatulong na tayo, nagiging stricto pa tayo, at nakakatulong din sa industriya. Yung po ang pinakamagandang gagawin ng ating gobyerno.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Belgica.
I think the problem lies with Marina dahil sa kanila bumagsak ang level na pag-aaral. So maybe we should just remove the entire thing from the Marina and put it in another department na mag-i-improve talaga ng quality and education na tinuturo po sa mga seafarers natin. Dahil sobra pong reklamo dyan sa Marina na natanggap ko ng aking opisina, and I think this what happened here is a result of their failure.
Any further follow-up, Mr. Dante Ang?
Well, yeah, the problem there is that, the agency that might be responsible is the Commission on Higher Education, and there are already people who are complaining that the CHED is imposing unreasonable regulation on private schools. In fact, there is a bill pending in the House, House Bill 10282, which will make all SUCs an instrument of the national government. And I think there's grave concern among not only the SUCs, but the entire tertiary education system about this particular House Bill.
Okay, any reaction? Go ahead, Secretary Panelo.
May naisip po, ito bang mga seafarers natin, ito ba ang karamihan nito'y mahihirap? Ito bang karamihan nito'y mga hindi nakatapos sa edukasyon? Kasi may problema ko tayo kahit yung Tertiary Act. Alam po ba ninyo na 12% lang ng pinakamahihirap ang nakakapasok ng free education at 17% ang galing sa mayayaman at 64% ang nasa middle class at nahihirapan po sa pagpasa kasi nga ang problema ang mahihirap kulang siyempre sa meron silang mga proctor, meron silang mga trainee, iba. Kaya lang may problema talaga tayo yung portion.
Thank you. Any follow-up? Okay, go ahead. We have room for two more.
With regards to the too much regulation complaint of the Marina, the President has issued and implemented ARTA and the ease of doing business. This is the first step towards that. I believe that what is important is that we adopt a modernization of our, we should be data-driven. Like for example, right now, Marina, the Marina should have the exact numbers of Filipinos, where they are, and even I'm saddened that the Marina was not included in the Department of Migrant Workers.
Okay, thank you. Secretary Piñol.
May I just go back to an earlier concern raised by Dr. Ang? yung paano natin i-improve yung ating local maritime industry. Alam nyo, yung mga barko natin napakaluma na. Ang iba dyan, World War II vintage. And napakabagal, napakamahal. In fact, it is more expensive to ship banana from Mindanao to Manila than to ship the bananas from Davao to Japan. So kailangan talagang tutukan ito at magpasa tayo ng batas na dapat may age limit yung mga barkong ginagamit sa ating...
You're correct, Secretary. The problem is in 2015, the Senate passed, the Congress passed the cabotage law.
Yeah.
Except that since 2015, all of the benefits that were expected from the passage of that law remain unrealized. And as you said, mas mahal po magpadala ng cargo from Cagayan de Oro to Manila than it is from Manila to Hong Kong, despite 6 years, 7 years of the cabotage law.
Well, since 6 years na po yun, I think it's due for review. And Congressman Rolex Suplico would know the process involved in a review of an existing law.
Okay. Thank you so much. If there are no further follow-up questions, we need to take a break. We still have a lot of questions coming up. So we'll have to take a break for now, but please stay tuned. SMNI Senatorial debate will be back shortly.
Ang pag-ularin sigurado nagagawa. Kaya't kung nais mo ng pagbabago, simulan mo na sa iyong sarili mismo. Kaya't ngayong darating na pilihan, mag-isip ng di na malinlang. Kalayaan sa pagboto ay panindigan.
Kinabukasan natin ang nakasalalay dyan.
Ituloy ang pagbabago. Ikaw at ako ang tanging susi nito. Ituloy ang pagbabago. Pag-asa ay siyang na matatambo.
Ituloy ang pagbabago. Ituloy ang pagbabago.
Pagpili ang iyong boto sa halagang 500 piso. Katumpasaban ng ilang sentimo ang digdigan mo. Politikong taliwas, kaban ng bayan na iwawadas. Kaya't maging mapanuri sa wastong pagpili. Huwag sayangin ang kita sa daliri. Ating responsable sa pagpili, magkaisa at magtulungan.
Kakayahan mong magpasyang magiging gabay sa pag-asenso ng bansa sa'yo magsisimula.
SMNI Senatorial Debate 2022. Now, many of you may be wondering, where is Attorney Karen Jimeno, who normally is the one moderating this series of debates? Unfortunately, she is in the middle of having an important family affair that she has to attend to, and that's why I was called in. So thank you very much for having me here. Now let's continue. Okay, so for this round, we will have the question will be asked from political scientist, Ms. Ana Malindog Uy. Ma'am Ana, go ahead.
Yeah. Good evening to everyone. My question would be more on constitutional change. Okay, it has been argued for some time now by many that the 1987 Constitution, which took effect in 1987 under the leadership of then President Corazon Aquino, needs to be revisited. Either it will be amended or revised altogether. Now, on this note, are you in favor of constitutional change? Yes or no? And why? And if the answer is yes, how would you propose it? Would it be an amendment or would it be a revision? Now, if it's an amendment, what specific provision in the Constitution would you want to amend? Now, if it's revision, because that's two different things, then are you in favor of a parliamentary form of government as against to presidential, what we have right now? And at the same time, are you in favor of a federal system of government as against to a unitary system that we have at the moment? So that is the question. So it's up to you to put it together, your answer, in briefly.
Thank you, Ms. Ana. For this round, we start with Secretary Panelo. You have 60 seconds.
Unang-una ho, ako'y pabor dyan. At kailangan po yung foreign ownership, baguhin na natin yan. Kailangan, like for instance, dun sa renewable energy, abay kailangan, sa ngayon 40% pwede lang silang pumasok, ownership. Mahirap pang kumuha ng mga partners. Kaya kailangan, taasan natin yan para makapasok ang investors. Pangalawa, gusto ko pong baguhin yung pagpili ng mga justices, ng mga judges. Sa akin pong pananaw, yung pong present system, mali yun. Kailangan, base natin sa examination at oral para papasa sila, kaya sila i-appoint para wala po silang utang na loob doon sa mga nagpapadrino at sa appointing power. Ayan po ang pinakamahalaga sa...
So you're in favor of amendment, not revision?
Aba, marami po kasi, kulang ang oras natin para isa-isahin ko yon. Yes. Pero sa ngayon, yung dalawang yon.
Thank you. Deputy Speaker Marcoleta.
Either revision or amendment, ang importante po ay may mapalitan tayong mga ilang provision dyan. Unang-una naman, kahapon po pinag-uusapan yung pag-claim sa Saba, pero ang sabi ko, hindi natin magagawa yon sapagkat sa 1987 Constitution, inalis po yung historic right or legal title. Kaya po kung gusto nating i-pursue yung claim sa Saba, ibalik po yun na nandun sa 1973 Constitution. At ako po ay laban din sa political dynasty. Gusto ko po tanggalin yung as may be provided by law para hindi na po kailangang magbatas sapagkat wala naman pong sigurong legislator that will legislate against his interest. Hindi mangyayari po yung anti-dynasty kapag nilagay po yung as may be provided by law. Dapat period na yun. At yung nga pong economic provisions talagang, marami po talagang dapat baguhin doon. Kailangan nating maimbita yung maraming mga ngalakal at magbibigay ng kapital dito sa ating bansa.
Thank you. Senator Gringo Honasan.
Whether it's amendment or revision, it must address certain issues. Unity, productivity, centralized planning, decentralized execution. If we decide to move into a federal form, no part must be bigger, stronger, or richer than the whole. Otherwise, there is no logic to this being a republic. Those will be the issues.
Okay, let me clarify things first now. Because when you talk about constitutional amendment, what you do there is you just revise or you just change the text of certain provision. But when you talk about revision, you actually propose a change in political structure in the country. Like for example, from a presidential to a parliamentary form. So that's why I'm asking, which of which you would push for if you be elected in the Senate? Because when you revise, it means you have to choose parliamentary, federal, presidential or parliamentary. So that's two different process, I think, or nature of change. So that's why you make a choice, amendment, revision, then the follow-up
Dr. Ana,
question.
if it's an either or,
It's an either or.
I would go for revision.
Okay,
And we do it now.
okay.
And we decide that this occupies top priority so that we can address systems and not personalities. And that includes the political party system. Let me add that I have not changed my position on political parties. When I just noticed Yusek Pimentel and Dr. Padilla getting mad with Dr. Claire, I defer to their better judgment.
Thank you. Senator J.V. Ejercito.
I'm in favor of amending the 1987 Constitution because it's been more than 40 years since it has been written. The world has changed, so much. The time it was written, there was no such thing as World Wide Web, internet information technology. The world has become so small at this point. So we need to make the Philippines more attractive to foreign investors. That's why I'm more particular that I am in favor of amending certain economic provisions, be it allowing foreigners bigger share by owning land. Anyway, hindi naman nila maiuwi yung lupa, no? Pwede sila mag-invest, but the land will stay here. So we have to study that, but I'm in favor of really of amending the economic provision so that we can adapt and be attuned to the changing times and be more competitive as compared to our ASEAN neighbors.
Okay, Mr. Jess Aranza.
I'll go for revision. And manner, I would like it to be a con-con so that it will avoid former mga politicians to meddle again. And I don't want to have some amendments because it's so hard to amend, and especially giving people, the foreigners, to own land. The moment they come in and go into subdivision of residential, then that will be the end of the ability of our poor people to buy house and lot. The price will rise. Kaya sana, doon lamang, if they want to, then they do reclaim. And when they reclaim, they can do whatever they want. But not an existing land that will be for our poor brothers and sisters in the Philippines.
Hey, Dr. Mengita Padilla.
I'm in favor of revision. I think we should really consider a federal form of government. I believe it should also be done early. Whatever revision should be done early. We have to give more leeway for foreign ownership of certain businesses so we can be more competitive in the world. And I also agree about the political party system. We have to revisit that as well. So I'm for revision. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We have Ms. Noor Mahal Kiram.
Yes, I'm for revision para federal system government. Kasi at least magkakaroon ng kanya-kanyang plano para in every state, yung Luzon, Visayas, Mindanao. At least hindi nakakalimutan ng Mindanao, hindi nakakalimutan ng Visayas, and some parts of the Philippines. Kasi yun yung medyo napag-iiwanan pagdating dito sa, kasi ang focus is nasa national lang. So siguro dito sa about the Sabah claim, siguro i-revise din yun. Kasi kami yung naapektuhan bilang isa sa direct heirs. Naapektuhan ako, pati yung mga kamag-anak ko.
Okay, thank you. Now we have Mr. Ding Diaz.
The political geographical division of our country is really ideal for a federal system of government, because we've got regions and each region can become federal states. However, there is no state that will survive without a strong economic base. So we go back to economics. Now, I would like to go back to prior to 1986. We are doing a lot of good things with the parliamentary system of government. We were able to minimize red tape, and the government bureaucracy was getting to be efficient. Okay? However, because it was a Marcos creation, or so what's thought, then, of course, the framers of the 1987 Constitution did not want it. But let me say something. I believe a shift to a parliamentary system of government could be the saving grace for our country and our people.
Thank you. Yusek Asra Pimentel.
Definitely, I am for the revision of the 1987 Constitution because I call the 1987 Constitution an emotional constitution. Minadali ang paggawa nito, hindi masyadong napag-isipan, hindi dumaan sa mas masusing paggawa. Ituloy ang pagbabagong sinimulan ng Pangulong Duterte. He already created the Constitutional Commission to study the 1987 and propose a new constitution. We must move for the parliamentary federal system of government wherein Vice President and President will be voted as one. And they will be another term for the President and Vice President. Sayang ang ating Pangulong Duterte. Napakagaling, napakaganda ng performance. Hindi mabigyan ng pagkakataong mamunong muli. And there should be regional representation in the Senate for the senators, 70-30 sharing of national wealth, anti-turncoatism, and strengthening of local government units.
Thank you. Let's hear from Secretary Manny Piñol.
The Constitution is a living document reflecting the feelings, the aspirations, the dreams of a people at a specific time. The time is now to revise the Constitution. Let's move towards federal parliamentary form of government. We have a working model, the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao, although it is a hybrid because they have an assembly, but at the same time they also have congressmen and mayors. But BARM is working very well. As the former point person of the president for the BARM, I can tell the whole country that the BARM is working very well, and we could actually study the success of BARM in as far as bringing government closer to the people is concerned. Now, on economic reforms, yes, I'm in favor of economic reforms, but I am against the 100% ownership of land in the Philippines. Mauubos yung lupa natin sa mayayamang dayuhan kapag binenta natin yung mga lupa natin.
Okay, maraming salamat. And now we move on to Secretary Bellica.
Yes, parliamentary federal form of government revision. At uno ko pong babaguhin ay ang justice system. Napakahina po ng justice system dito sa Pilipinas. Halos wala napaparusahang kriminal at korap. Dahil nagtatambak ang kaso sa korte at meron kulang na kulang po ang mga judges. You have only 2,500 judges to adjudicate for 110 million Filipinos. You know, kaya meron isang korte, sabi ko na I have 6,000 cases and may backlog. Kahit magtapos ako ng isang kaso, isang araw, 365 cases lang matatapos ko. Kaya ho hindi napaparusahan. I will strengthen the justice system. I will add more courts, add more judges so that napaparusahan po ang mga kriminal at korap. Dahil corruption po talaga ang dahilan kung bakit naghihirap ang ating bayan. At kung mapaparusahan po yan, maibabalik ang penalty of death sa mga heinous crimes and corruption, marami pong babait dito sa Pilipinas.
Follow-up questions?
I have a follow-up question. Okay. Sa mga nagsabi na they want to have kind of a constitution, revise the constitution or propose a new constitution, and there are some of you who said that you want federal system at the same time parliament. Now let's go back to parliamentary. Why do you think we need to why we need to change to a parliamentary form? What's the advantage of having a parliamentary form of government as against to a presidential form of government?
Well,
go ahead.
In a parliamentary form of government, you can change a bad leader at any given time, and you can hang on to a good leader as long as you want to.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Marcoleta, Congressman Marcoleta.
The other positive aspect of a parliamentary government is that there is a fusion between the executive and the legislative departments, and therefore may expedite po ang mga batas na gagawin because they consult with each other. Hindi matagal ang proseso, lalong-lalo na kung ang mga batas na iniisip natin ay kailangan madaliin, kagaya po ng halimbawa kanina ni Dr. Ang na imminent po ang problema na kinakaharap ng ating mga seafarers. Ito ay masusolusyonan kapag ang dalawa ay very cooperative departments of government.
Okay, thank you. Any rebuttal? Okay, Secretary Panelo?
Ang dagdag pa po doon, pag parliamentary kasi, as correctly stated by Congressman Marcoleta. May fusion. So in other words, hindi na sisisihan ang dalawa. Sapagkat magkasama nga sila eh. A vote of no confidence lang, palit ka na. Pangalawa, yung pong magiging issue sa election, hindi na personalities, kundi political parties na. Yan ang kagandahan.
Okay, Ms. Pimentel, go ahead.
Exactly, under the parliament system of government, political parties will be strengthened, representation will be fair and objective, as well as in the parliamentary, based on studies all over the world, parliamentary form of governments are the less corrupt governments because yun na nga, madaling palitan ang leader na masama ang performance.
Thank you. Mr. Ding Diaz.
Daphne,
Yes.
there's a follow-up. In the past, the Chacha Express started in the House. Pero ang pumipigil nito ay Senado. And you're all running for the Senate. So ako po'y natutuwa na parang lahat kayo ay gusto ng Chacha. Ito po'y matutuloy sana kung kayo po'y mahalal bilang senador ng Republika.
Okay. Go ahead, Mr. Ding Diaz.
In response to Vice Governor Suplico.
Please do, please.
Yes. Probably the reason for this is that we are running not for ourselves. We are running to further the interest of the Filipino people, which has long been suppressed by the wrongful leaders that has been being elected in our country, whose interests are all what are theirs, not what is the people's.
Okay, anyone? Okay, go ahead, Senator Honasan.
One major consideration is the cost. Not only the economic or financial cost, the political cost, the social cost. It is said that the 87 Constitution was a very angry Constitution. And it's a rule in life. You do not make decisions when you are angry, happy, tired, or all of the above. Lastly, one consequence is the local government code. We devolved authority and responsibility. We forgot to devolve the money. These are things that we should address frontally.
Go ahead.
In defense of the local government code, I believe that Senator Nene Pimentel fought for the correct distribution of the national wealth. In fact, right now we are very happy that President Duterte really fast-tracked the Mandanas-Garcia ruling para sa lahat ng local government units.
Okay, Secretary Panelo.
Doon po sa revision ng Constitution, meron nagsabi rito na maganda federalism, which is true. In fact, yun po sinulong ni Presidente Duterte. Subalit, nung isang araw nga, sinabi niya, wala, I give up. Kasi ayaw ng taong bayan. Pero mukhang nakikita natin, mukhang hindi naman taong bayan ang ayaw. Mukhang mawalang galang na sa mga senador. Sila ang kumukontra. Alam niyo mo bakit? Under federalism, mawawala yung kanilang term. Kasi kailangan mo ng mga dalawang senador sa region makakat yung term nila, kaya kinontra nila.
Okay, Dr. Uy.
Sige.
Go, Mama.
Just one more.
Okay. Mr. Marcoleta at Senator JV.
Ang problema po kasi, bago natin ma-revise o ma-amend ang Constitution, ay kailangan po talaga either a constituent body or a constitutional convention. Pinagtatalunan po kasi namin palagi kung ano ang gagawin, kung Constituent Assembly, ang gusto naman ng Senado palagi, separate voting. Samantalang ang ating saligang batas, pwede namang joint voting. Ito po yung pinaka-problema natin kaya hindi natin ma-revise. Kailangan alisin natin ang pamumulitika para kung gusto nating i-revise, ma-revise natin o kaya kung i-amend ang ating
Senator JV.
Siguro matanong ko lang po tungkol sa federalism, no? Anybody can answer. Maganda ho yung idea, no? We will give we will have autonomous states. No? Pero ang problema ho natin, ang kailangan i-address doon, yung pong mga mahihirap na regions, baka lalong mas maiwan. In the study of federalism, no? Okay po takin niya, kaya lang, ang magsusurvive lang ho is Calabar Zone, NCR, and probably Cebu region. So baka anybody can answer.
May I just
Dr. Uy, you have a follow-up question?
May I just comment on that?
There is a follow-up question from Dr. Carlos, then I will have a follow-up question.
Okay, let's go ahead. Yeah. Go ahead, Dr. Carlos.
Yeah. Okay, it seemed like the spirit of everyone is really to migrate to parliamentary system. And I'd like you to consider the 3 pluses of a parliamentary system, which is, 1, you only have a 2-week, 10, 12-day campaign period, unlike what you're having here where you're campaigning forever. Number two, term limits will not be a relevant issue because you can be 100 years old and for as long as you are elected as an MP, you will be an MP. And third, political dynasty will not be an issue because you will be elected by the electoral constituency. And yes, the part I forget, that if you want the political leader to stay there longer than 2,000 days, then you get a chancellor or a prime minister who will be there until he falls dead. So, aren't those four major selling points for a parliamentary system?
A reaction to Dr. Carlos. Go ahead, Secretary Piñol.
Actually, this is a reaction to the statement of JV, you know. Yung sinabi na kawawa yung mahirap na region kapag nag-federalize. Actually, yung BARB is the poorest region and it's doing well. So, medyo siguro kailangan natin pag-aralan ng mabuti.
May pabor din tayo.
Go ahead, Senator JV.
Yes, I'm in favor, but we just have to address that lingering question about federalism. But if it will be addressed, then I will be supportive of that, if that can be answered.
Okay, let's go back to Dr. Carlos's 4 points. Any reaction to that? Go ahead, Yusek Pimentel.
First reaction to Senator JV's comment. In the federal system form of government that PDP Laban has proposed, there is an equalization fund. Tinatawag nating equalization fund wherein the poor regions will be developed also and will be helped by the federal government. And I totally agree with Professor Carlos about the points on parliamentary form of government.
Hey, go ahead.
Yeah, I have nothing to say to react to Professor Carlos' statement dahil tama po lahat yun. Pero siguro tama rin yung sinabi ni Senator JV that there are provinces and regions na hindi kaya. So I've gone around and I realized that there are regions na kaya. So pwede na tayong mag-selective federal government. Doon sa mga regions na kaya, probinsya na kaya, bigay na. Doon sa mga hindi kaya, suportahan muna na national government hanggang magkaya na sila magsarili.
Okay, Ma'am Anna, you have a follow-up question?
Yes, my follow-up question would be not exactly about, well, you've answered already my question, no? And I have a sense of what you want when you get elected, hopefully, as senators with regards to constitutional change. Now, my question is related to that in some ways, no? My follow-up question. As you know, in this country, there's such a thing as communist insurgency. And we're talking about constitutional change, and some of you would want to have amendments to the Constitution. Now, my question is, pabor ba kayo na institutionalized? I mean, when you speak of institutionalization, is talagang mag-create ka ng body and all that, and sustain funding and everything. The NTF-LCAC, institutionalized NTF-LCAC, to address and to, you know, para mawala na ang tinatawag mong communist insurgency as you go through this constitutional or amendments in the Constitution. So that's my follow-up question.
Okay, Deputy Speaker Marcoleta.
I am in favor
And
of
why?
institutionalizing LCAC by way of a legislative action. Napakatanda na po ng insurgency sa ating bansa. Napakalaking pera ang ginugugol natin dyan para lamang labanan ng insurgency. Ngunit hindi nagtagumpay yan. At ang nakita kong pagtatagumpay ay nakukuha dun sa localized approach na ginagawa ng administrasyon ni Pangulong Duterte. Kaya ako po ay naniniwala na kapag ito'y na-institutionalize natin, unti-unti, maalis po natin ang insurgency, ma-achieve natin ang kapayapaan sa bansa.
Mr. Jess Aranza.
Ang LCAC po ay hindi military activities, hindi offensive. Ang pagkaalam ko, ang LCAC ay binibigyan ng karapatan yung mga barangay lahat yan na magkaroon sila ng sariling kabuhayan, sariling paghahanap buhay, upang sa ganun, mawala sa kanila yung mga paghihikaya sa kanila sumama doon sa mga revolusyonaryo. So, hindi ho military yan. Yan ho ay ginagawa na mabuti para magkaroon ng kabuhayan sila mismo.
Salamat. Mr. Ding Diaz.
Ang aking pong paniwala regarding the communist insurgency, wala naman po talagang totoong ideologue dito sa atin. Wala po yung hardcore. At ako po'y naniniwala, maski na po yung mga rebelde na nabubuhay po sa bundok, hindi po nila gustong nilalamok sila sa kanilang pagtulog. Hindi rin po nila gusto na malayo po sila sa mga mahal nila sa buhay. Ang gusto po nila, at gusto nating lahat, mabuhay tayo ng maayos. Sa pamamagitan po ng NTF-LCAC, palagay ko po, malapit-lapit na tayo sa katuparan ng pagbibigay ng maayos ng pamumuhay doon po sa mga naliligaw ng landas.
So you are in favor of institutionalizing it?
Okay, Secretary Belhica.
Yes, in fact, when I was chairman and commissioner of the PACC, I was a member of the NTF-LCAC. And rest assured that if God allows that I be elected or work as one of your senators, we will institutionalize the NTF-LCAC and fight every move to defund it again. Maganda ho ang ginagawa ng NTF-LCAC, talagang effective ang kanilang barangay development program dahil nararamdaman ng tao at mga rebelde ang gobyerno tumutulong at maabot sa kanila.
Okay, salamat. Yusek Pimentel, you were going to say something?
Without development, without peace, there is no development. The NTF-LCAC should be institutionalized. The barangay development program should be funded, and we should fight insurgency, even the recruitment of our fellow Filipinos who are abroad. Dahil kahit ngayon po, yung mga rebelde, nire-recruit kahit yung mga OFWs at kahit yung mga OFs para labanan ang ating gobyerno.
Daphne, follow up to Commissioner Belhica. Baka sakali pong lapitan kayo ng CPP, NPA, NDF at hingihan kayo ng permit to campaign. Kayo pa yung bibigay doon?
Hindi ho, over my dead body.
At kung may kaibigan kayo mangonsulta sa inyo, kasi sa local officials, realidad yan na babayad ka doon para makakuha ka ng permit to campaign. Anong advice nyo rin po?
Bahala na siya sa kampanya niya, pero kung ako nasa lugar niya, hindi ko gagawin yan. In fact, andyan ang NTF-LCAC, andyan ang mga kasundaluhan, yun ang lapitan niya. Dahil funding the communism will only lengthen the war or yung awayan, and we should stop doing that.
Now, tinanong na ito ni MJ Mondihar, ang NPA ba, si PPNDF, kalaban ba o kaibigan?
NPA, kalaban po yan. Dahil that's who they are. Pero tama rin yung sinasabi nila na marami po dyan, wala nang ideolohiya, nang gugulo na lamang. In fact, most of them should be treated as criminals, no longer as NPAs.
Maraming salamat.
Salamat, sir.
Secretary Panelo?
Thank you, Dayan.
Gusto ko lang po susugan yung mga sinabi ng mga kasamaan dito upang makita nyo ang damdamin ng mga kandidato ngayon kaugnay dito sa NTF-LCAC. Gaya po ng sinabi ko kahapon, sa aking paglilibot sa buong bansa, yung pong mga lugar na nabigyan ng malaking pondo ng NTF-LCAC ay nawala yung mga rebelde. Kaya kailangan talagang gawin ng permanente ito upang yumabong ang mga lugar na pinagbubugaran ng mga komunista.
Okay. Pakisagot daw po ang tanong, kaibigan daw po ba or kalaban ang NPA? Go ahead, Mr. Diaz.
Yeah.
Neither. Okay? Dahil marami po, alam ko, marami po sa mga rebelde, sumama po sila roon, hindi po dahil sila'y naniniwala sa adhikain ng mga komunista. Sila po ay pumunta po rin doon dahil nakatikim po sila ng kaapihan, nakatikim po sila ng kapabayaan. Ngunit doon po sa samahan na yon, nakita po nila na mayroon pala silang kasama. Pero hindi po nila naiintindihan kung ano po ang pagiging komunista. Yun po ang katotohanan dyan.
Go ahead, Secretary Piñol.
I am for the institutionalization of the NTF-LCAC. And contrary to claims na anti-communist campaign, it's actually a rural development program based on incentivization. No? So, kung tahimik ang barangay mo, eto may pera ka. At very effective. And to answer the question of Congressman Suplico, yes, nangihingi ng permit to campaign ng NPA. When I was governor, hinihingan lang ako. I did not give 1 peso.
Okay. It seems that are we unanimous in thinking that the NTF-LCAC should be institutionalized? Are there any dissenting opinions? None.
There's none. Okay. And also, follow-up question with that institutionalization. Would it mean as well that if you will be elected as senators, you will not defund NTF-LCAC? Of course not, no?
Definitely.
No.
Of course not.
Okay, thank you so much.
Can I say something?
Meron lang akong
Oh, madaming gusto masalita. Go ahead, Secretary Panelo.
Kaugnay po dun sa sinasabing yung mga rebelde sila ba'y kalaban o kakampi? Sa totoo lang, yung NTF-LCAC na programa, yun ay pabor sa mga komunista. Sabagat hindi po bang pinaglalaban nila kabuhayan. Pinaglalaban nila kailangan ang kanilang mga kailangan ay tugunan. Tinutugunan nga po eh. Kaya pabor nga sa kanila yun. Kaya nawawala sila sa pagre-rebelde laban sa gobyerno.
Go ahead, Secretary Bellica, and we'll go to that end after.
Yeah, it's just a rebuttal. Iba ho kasing NPA eh. Ito ho yung may ideolohiya. Ito po yung kahit anong pakikiusap ng gobyerno, pakikipag-usap at inaabot ng gobyerno, ayaw pumayag. Yun, kalaban po yun. Pero yung mga nadadala sa kanila dahil sa mga issues na nilalabas sila sa korupsyon, kahirapan, iba po yun. Yun po ang inaabot ng NTF-LCAC. So, ang NPA, kalaban po ng gobyerno yun.
Dr. Padilla?
Ako in favor of institutionalizing. Tapos makakontrolin natin with oversight yan eh. Di ba? Kung it's a law. We can also, kasi ang problema, magandang layunin. I read the EO. Magandang all of country, all of government approach.
Whole
Kasi,
approach, yeah.
the whole approach. Kailangan whole approach. Kasi yung kabuhayan, social services, tapos may law enforcement. Di ba? So it's a ganda. Implementation lang ang bantayan natin.
So it means it's very important for the oversight.
Oversight is important.
Thank you. Senator J.V. Ejercito.
Aside from NTF-LCAC, I would go for a supplement to this program, which is massive infrastructure development, because I believe that this will be the way to spread out the development to the countryside. No? The reason why the rebels or the insurgency is able to recruit is because of the stomach. No? Hungry stomach knows no loss. Madali mag-recruit. But if there are jobs and opportunities, you create growth development areas in the countryside, I think the insurgency will slowly die because people will now have jobs and opportunities.
Okay, Senator Honasan.
Itong insurgency, hindi ito laban between soldiers and rebels. No? Okay lang, masaktan sila, mamatay. Ang problema, morally unacceptable. Pag tinatamaan yung civilian, bata, matanda, babae, lalaki, that is unacceptable. So, no, how do you fight an idea for an insurgency, for terrorism? You fight it with a better idea. Good government. At ang front line natin dyan, local government.
Thank you. And Secretary Panelo.
Ito ay kaugnay sa sinabi ni dating Senador Ejercito, yung supplement. Actually, yung pong NTF-LCAC fund, yun nga ginagamit. Part nun ay ginagamit sa infrastruktura. Kaya nga precisely nagkakaroon ng farm-to-market roads, yung mga kalsada nila, yung sa bundok. Ako po'y nasaksihan ko yun dahil nagpunta ako sa mga bundok na ito at nakita ko na dahil sa NTF-LCAC, sila ay nagbago na ng buhay nila.
Salamat. Nakita ko si Mr. Jess Aranza. Hindi ko yata natanong.
Sagot lang doon sa kung magkaibigan o magkaaway. Sabi ko, wala pa akong nakita magkaibigan nagpapatayan.
Galing.
Yes, go ahead, Deputy Speaker Marcoleta.
Ang insurgency po ay talagang kalaban ng pamahalaan. Kaya nga ang tawag po ay insurgency. Ang idea ay para ibagsak ang pamahalaan. Wala po sigurong kaibigan na naghahangad na ang pamahalaan na ating pinakamamahal na dapat pagtagumpayan ay gustong ibagsak. Kaya kalaban po sila.
So, malakas na lahat kayo ay in favor of institutionalizing the NTF-LCAC?
Daphne, last question.
Oh, go ahead.
On the issue of NTF-LCAC.
Go ahead.
Well, meron ng mga senadores, no? Incumbent senators, na nag-announce na tanggalan ng budget o defund ang NTF-LCAC. Meron kayang reaction kayo doon?
What's the reason?
Reaction, please. Go ahead, Secretary Bellica.
Napansin ko po yan nung malapit ng eleksyon. Saan inilipat yung pera? Doon po sa mga insertions. Insertions para sa kalang mga programa dahil po doon posibleng may korupsyon. Hindi ko nilalahat. Pero inilalagay yung pera sa korupsyon na dapat nandun sana sa paglaban sa terorismo.
Follow up to Commissioner Bellica. Kayo po'y quoted as saying, no, sa investigasyon nyo sa pork barrel,
yes, sir,
na around 10 to 15% nawawala doon dahil sa corruption.
Tama po yan. Conservative po yun. May mas malalaki pa raw doon. Pero yun po ang sinasabi sa akin. Pinagbawal po ng Korte Suprema ang PDAF, ang pork barrel system. Yun po ang aking inilaban noong 2013 na tinawag na Bellica ruling. Pero now, I guess the legislators, a lot of legislators have learned how to skirt around the law. And yan po ang sinasabi ko, that we have to create a anti-corruption body strong enough that will have jurisdiction over all government officials, not only with presidential appointees like the PACC, so we can hold accountable government officials and private individuals who get involved in corruption and impose a penalty of death against corruption.
Thank you.
And heinous crime.
So galit sila dahil yung projects ay hindi sa kanila.
Opo, galit po sila.
Thank you.
Actually, lahat po ng ang usap-usapan sa baba, basta raw bumaba sa distrito, doon daw po yun sa ibang mga congressman.
Okay.
So yung project may kasama ng contractor. Tama
Kasama na po yun. Kabisado niyo yan, Gob.
Well, narinig ko on the ground, no? Advance pa daw yun eh.
Tama po. Thank you for...
Let's go on to Secretary Panelo.
As an additional response to Congressman Rolex, yung po tinatanong nyo na may mga senador na kumontra sa NTF-ELCAC. Publicly, ang masasabi ko po sa kanila, either kayo ay naliligaw ng landas or meron kayong hidden agenda sapagkat kinokontra nyo yung para sa mga taong makikinabang sa NTF-ELCAC.
Okay. We have a follow-up question or a message from Dr. Carlos.
Yeah, final follow-up. I noticed that some of you had used the term communist insurgency. Who is a communist? I think it was the only country using that term, by the way.
I don't think it's...
Sino ba yung komunista?
Wala na, it's
Can we have some definition of terms?
Okay.
So, unless, we know what it is, let's just stop talking about a communist insurgency. You just have an insurgency. It is not a communist insurgency. The so-called communist countries are out and out capitalist. So,
There's no
please
such
stop
thing.
using the term communist.
I agree.
You cannot defend that.
Thank you, Dr. Carlos. Reaction from Yusek Pimentel.
I agree with Professor Carlos not to call them communist. Kagaya nung katanungan, kung ang mga NPA ba ay kalaban o kaibigan, ang sasabihin ko, ang mga NPA ay Pilipinong nangangailangan ng serbisyo ng gobyerno.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Diaz.
Going back to the NTF-ELCAC, I believe that if elected senator, I would use NTF-ELCAC to promote my advocacy of total economic emancipation to the common Filipino. That could be a very good vehicle.
Thank you. Let's hear from Miss Kiram.
Yung tungkol naman sa kung ang NPA is kalaban or hindi. Sa nakikita ko, may pinaglalaban lang din sila. Hindi ko sinasabing ano sila ng gobyerno. Kaya lang may pinaglalaban sila na dapat pakinggan siguro ng national, ng gobyerno. Kasi mula noon hanggang ngayon, actually pawala na yung iba. Tayong sa mga generation namin pababa, hindi na alam kung anong ibig sabihin nun. So meron silang mga nire-recruit na mga mas bata. Tapos sumasama sila dahil may mga ideology na akala nila tama.
Salamat.
Quickly,
ahead,
just
Dr.
very
Wei.
quick. You've mentioned na may nire-recruit silang mga bata. So basically, you're talking about child soldier, no? Or warrior child. If ever you be elected as senator of this country, how would you address that in terms of legislation?
Siguro po general knowledge sa mga sa schools, sa mga bata, pati na rin sa mga magulang na etong kailangan turuan po yung mga nakakabata sa atin kasi yung mga nag-aanong NPA or kung sino man na kumakalaban sa gobyerno, may mga pinaglalaban yan. Kaya lang, ang problema, hindi natin alam kung ano ba talaga. Nung unang panahon, yes, alam natin, pero ngayon hindi na kasi natin alam kung ano talaga.
Anyone can answer the question about the issue of recruitment, no? Because she mentioned about recruitment of children, no? In terms of being child soldiers. So, if elected as senators, how would you address that?
Go ahead, Senator Harnasan.
It's a very important issue, no? When you talk about child's right, yeah.
Dr. Ana, we might want to consider applying the power of information and communications technology to improve our data management. Madidiscover po natin yan, no? Yung mga kandidato na mapupunta sa Senado. Sa Senado po, kanya-kanyang expert. Kanya-kanyang data. The COVID has allowed us to look at problems that existed before the COVID, which is baseline data management. It will tell us where they are recruiting the child soldiers.
Okay, thank you so much. Go ahead, Deputy Speaker Marcoleta.
Bago ko sagutin yun, ay babalik tayo dun sa tanong ni Dr. Carlos kasi tinatanong niya, sino ba yung nagsabi ng communist insurgency? Sino po ba sa amin yung nagsabi, Dr. Carlos?
Ako
Kasi
actually
hindi po ako
nagsabi
yun.
na. So I'm being addressed.
Siguro, dahil 75 na ako, baka nakalimutan ko kung sino nagsabi. So,
Salamat po.
It's
wag
okay,
na lang
it's
kayo
okay.
bumamin. Basta natinig ko yun.
Salamat. Balikan natin ang legislation about the child soldiers.
Yeah.
May
Minor
I
children or-
respond to Professor Carlos? Why some of us, or one of us, use the word communist insurgency. We must remember that there is such thing as Communist Party of the Philippines. They call themselves communist. They adopted communism as their ideology. They are espousing the same ideology that has been espoused by communist leaders of yesteryears. That is the reason why one or some of us are using the word communist insurgency.
My main objection in regard to that is you attach the term to the term insurgency. And so when you do that, I agree with you. There's a Communist Party of the Philippines, there's Partido Comunista ng Pilipinas, but my concern is when you define the insurgency in terms of that ideological framework, which is not the case. That is the reason why, because I'm a political scientist, I'd rather that you use a little bit more precise term. Let's just call it insurgency, please, because it's not communist insurgency as communist from the theoretical framework of Karl Marx and other socialist thinkers. Para lang malinis, no?
Yeah, I got
Maybe-
Thank you, Dr. Carlos. Again,
About the child soldiers.
Yeah, before we go on a break, we would like to know
how
about...
would you prevent recruitment of children, to participate in insurgency? In different aspects. As senators, let us say you're senators already, no? And you
Yusek
have to
Pimentel?
legislate a law to prevent that. So, how would you address that? Yes, sir?
Ms. Pimentel first, yeah?
Education is very important. At kung titingnan natin yung datos about the child soldiers, karamihan ng nare-recruit nilang mga child soldiers are members of the indigenous peoples. Dahil nga ang mga indigenous peoples have lesser access. Ito nga yung nais nating ipaglaban dahil yung ating mga IPs have no access to education dahil walang paaralan o kung meron mang paaralan, napakalayo sa kanila. At dahil dito, madali silang ma-recruit, madali silang mabilog ang kanilang mga utak.
Okay. Any addition to that?
Yes, yes.
Go ahead, Secretary Panelo.
I agree, because there is no legislation that can stop it. You have to educate them. The whys and the wherefores of such kind of ideology that is very destructive. Wala po talagang kahit na maglagay ka dyan ng batas. Pag yung mga dahilan kung bakit umusbong ang rebellion at ang tinatawag na insurgency dito sa bansa ay naririyan pa rin, ay hindi niyo po matatanggal kahit na 1,000 batas ang ipasa natin sa Kongreso.
Okay, salamat. Dr. Padilla.
I just want to say I agree with both Yusek Pimentel and Mr. Panelo, Attorney Panelo. You cannot legislate that, no? Economic development is the answer. That's why we have to really give them economic development, no? And education. And the indigenous people have to be protected. We have to treat them special. We have to give them ways and means to earn a living. Once you have that, hindi na sasama sa mga insurgents. Kasi pera lang yan eh, It's more money than anything else. Walang ideology. Give them livelihood. Yeah.
Mr. Jess Aranza.
If you disperse economic development, encourage industry to locate branches or stay in areas, in far-flung areas where there are no developments, you will be able to develop a create a balanced development and income. You can achieve a more equitable distribution of wealth.
Okay. We are about to wrap it up. Let's just hear from Mr. Marcoleta and Mr. Hanasan.
Everybody knows that recruitment of insurgents is rooted in injustice. At ang injustice po ay maraming forma yan. Meron siyang economic deprivation, nakikita niya yung mga iba't ibang mga hindi magagandang nangyayari sa lipunan, wala siyang makapitan. Ito po yung problema. Kaya nga po, hindi natin malilegislate talaga yan. Pero yung LCAC, ito po ay isang approach na ginagawa ng gobyerno para sa ganun ma-address nga po ito. Kahit pa unti-unti, magsimula tayo at sa dako-dako roon ay makakamit natin yung inahanap nating tagumpay sa parting ito.
Thank you. Go ahead. Senator Hernasan.
Ma'am, babalik at babalik tayo sa data. Let's look at the demographics at family level. Okay. If we're looking at child soldiers, mas malalaho ang problema natin ngayon. WHO reports that 100 Filipino children die every day between the ages of 0 to 6 from malnutrition or malnutrition-related causes. So we're raising a new generation of mentally retarded children. Suppose one of them becomes senator. May problema na naman tayo.
Okay, thank you very much. Are our panelists okay now? We are ready to go on a break. Thank you again to our panelists, and thank you to our candidates for addressing all the questions, sir. This is just the end of round one. So we have to move on, and don't go away. SMNI Senatorial Debates 2022. We'll be right back.
Gabay para sa tamang pagpili ngayong eleksyon, hatid namin sa inyo itong mga leksyon.
Sino ang dapat na magpatuloy sa pagbabagong nasimulan? Sino ang dapat na mailukno sa kapangyarihan?
Dapat may paninindigang ipagpatuloy ang laban kontra insurhensya at iligal na droga.
Matapang, ngunit may puso, may malasakit, handang magpatawad, tagapagtaguyod ng kapayapaan at pagkakaisa.
Handang isakripisyo ang meron siya, mapunan lang ang kakulangan ng iba. Ang pulso ng taong bayan, nasa sa kanya.
Mautak, madiskarte at alam ang saklaw ng batas. May konkretong solusyon sa bawat problema, lalo na sa gitna ng krisis at pandemya.
Kilalanin mo ang iyong iboboto. Aralin ang plataforma. Paano ito isa sa katuparan at patatagalin? Suriin ang track record.
Sawa na tayo sa puro forma at salita. Ang kailangan natin ang magpapatuloy sa pagbabagong natatamasa ng sambayan ng Pilipino.
May malakas na paninindigan sa tama, hindi magtataksil sa bayan at hindi tayo ipagpapalit sa kahit anuman.
Matapat at hindi magnanakaw, hindi sarili, kundi ang interes ng bayan ang inuuna.
May political will, totoo ang serbisyo at handang ibigay ang lahat. Matugunan lamang ang mga isyu na kinakaharap at kakaharapin pa ng bansa. Bilang botante, nasa atin ang responsibilidad na ihalal ang nararapat. Isa itong desisyon para sa nakararami kung kaya't pag-isipang mabuti.
Huwag magpadala sa kasikatan at sabi-sabi. Ikaw mismo ang kumilatis. Tandaan, nakasalalay sa desisyon mo ang magiging kinabukasan ng bansa. Kaya, maging matalino. Maliban sa totoo, dapat may karanasan at kapasidad na mamuno.
Hindi ka mabibili, kaya huwag kang magpapabayad. Bigyang dangal ang iyong boto.
Katuwang nyo ang SMNI sa isang malinis at patas na eleksyon. Dahil dito, siguradong balitang totoo.
Ibibigay namin sa inyo mga impormasyong tama. Tuloy ang pagbabago kahit sa pagbabalita.
Sama-sama po tayo tungo sa bagong bansa. Piliin ang magpapatuloy sa mga programang nasimulan ng administrasyon.
Ituloy.
Ituloy.
Ituloy. Ituloy. Ituloy. Ituloy. Ituloy.
Ituloy.
Ituloy.
Ituloy. Ituloy. Ituloy ang pagbabago.
Laganap man ang mga huwad na balita, ang katotohanan ay hinding-hindi may kakailang. Piliin kung saan naroroon ang totoo. Huwag ang walang basihan at may pinapaboran. Alamin ang tunay na pangyayari. Habang kami maghahatid sa inyo, hindi lamang kwento, kundi mga impormasyong tama, walang pinapanigan at totoo. Higit pa sa mainit na balita, ang dala namin ay makatotohanang pagbabalita. SMNI, totoong boses ng bayan.
Sa muling pagsikat ng araw, isang desisyon ang kailangan mong pakawalan. Desisyon hindi lamang para sa iyong sarili, kundi para sa iyong minamahal. Desisyon para sa katrabaho, kapitbahay, sa iyong kaibigan, at maging sa iba, sa hindi mo kilala. Desisyon para sa kinabukasan ng mga bata, sa mga nangangailangan, sa mga pinagpalang lubos, sa mga kapos, sa mga walang pakialam, sa mga magtatapos na, sa mga magsisimula pa lang. Desisyon para sa bansang nasa gitna na ng pagbangon. Piliin ang tama ngayong eleksyon.
Ang Mindanao ay kabilang sa rehiyon sa katimugang Pilipinas na may mahabang kasaysayan ng armadong labanan. Sa pag-upo ni Pangulong Rodrigo Duterte, isa sa kanyang ipinangako ay ang palayain ang mga Mindanaoan mula sa karahasan at dalhin ang mga ito sa kapayapaan.
We're now at the second round of our debate. Our questions at this point will be from one of our SMNI anchors and a representative from a sector. For this round, we have the same mechanics of the debate. Each candidate has 60 seconds to answer each question, and later on, we will have 30 seconds of interpolation and rebuttals. Our first question is from Sas Rogando Sasot, SMNI anchor based in the Netherlands.
If during your term as senator, the executive department entered into a non-aggression treaty with China to not allow any foreign country to use one's territory as a base for direct or indirect aggression and intervention against the other country, how will you decide during the ratification of this non-aggression treaty with China?
Okay, we will now start with Deputy Speaker Rodante Marcoleta.
The question is on whether or not the Philippines will sign a non-aggression treaty with China.
I think it's for other countries.
I think we have to be guided by our state policy. I will go back to that because our state policy states that in our relationship with other states, the paramount consideration is national sovereignty, our political integrity, our national interest, and our right to self-determination. I will be able to process that by being able to reflect on these guideposts. If in my determination, all these particular factors and elements of our state policies are served, then I will act in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you. We move on to Senator Gringo Honasan.
What will drive our decision to sign a non-aggression treaty is our foreign policy, our security policy, and economic policy. And this will be based on how we define our national interest. But our audience is not only China, but the entire global community. We must continue to occupy high moral ground by pushing for peace and economic stability, political stability in the region. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's hear from Senator J.V. Ejercito.
As long as our sovereignty is protected, then and our territorial integrity are both protected, then we have to study this one. No? And likewise, if we also agree that we want peace in China. If we can have joint exploration probably, but we have to make sure that if ever it's in our property, we have to in territory, we have to be on the upper ground. No? We have to make sure in the Senate that we will not be shortchanged. In fact, we have to be on the high ground. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Jess Aranza.
We have a favorable decision from the arbitral court. How will that be affected if we sign? Will that totally erase that victory? If it will not, then I will agree. But if it does, then I will not.
Thank you. Let's move on to Dr. Mingita Padilla.
I don't think I will immediately sign it. I don't think it's even necessary. Because if it's a non-aggression, it means we will not be, do anything against the other. It's like, I don't want my hands to be tied for that. Because if something really necessitates me partnering with another country, because they did something to us, I don't want my hands to be tied. So I will not sign such a treaty without studying it very well. It should not be against our country's interest. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Nurmahal Kiram?
Kung makakatulong po ito sa Pilipinas, then it's okay. Magsasign po tayo. Pero kung halimbawa wala naman po siyang kinalaman or konti lang po yung mapapakinabangan po natin, then pag-aralan muna po natin ulit. Ha?
Thank you. Mr. Ding Diaz?
When it comes to ratification of foreign treaties, I believe the main basis of any particular senator would be what is good for the people, because what is good for the people is going to be good for the country. Now, considering that the other country in particular is China, then we are talking actually of the entire region, if not the entire Asia. A non-aggression agreement, tulad nga po ng sinabi ni Doktora, wala naman po ito dahil non-aggression. But in actuality, kasi po, world powers play by perception. It's always a mind game. It's always a psychological game for them. And it's the same thing that is happening in the West Philippine Sea, same thing that is happening in Europe, same thing that's happening in any particular country. We play our cards right. I will sign if it is for the betterment of the Filipino people.
Thank you. Yusek Astra Pimentel.
When we look at the history of the Philippines and China, we have always been trade partners. Nagsimula pa sa barter, hanggang sa ngayon ay kapartner natin ang Chinese. Wherever we look, wherever we go, there are Chinese Filipinos around us. The non-aggressive treaty, if we look at all the conditions that's being there, I would consider it, most especially if what's being said there, what's being placed there are towards peace, development, economic development, exchange of technology that is geared towards mutual development. Thank you.
Thank you. Secretary Manny Piñol.
Again, let me repeat that foreign policy is the exclusive domain of the President. But I will share my thoughts on this issue. Number one, is there really a need for a non-aggression treaty? Is there a threat of aggression in the first place? If there's none, I don't see any reason why we should sign a non-aggression treaty. Second, if there is indeed a need for a non-aggression treaty, would, as emphasized by Mr. Aranza, would the WPS issue come into play? If this is settled, then I will support it. But if that is not settled, I will not support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Secretary Greco Belgica.
No, it's tantamount to surrendering our opportunity to protect ourselves.
Correct.
I think it's a trap. It's a
Time.
trap to... Now, who will define and how will you define aggression in the first place? Suddenly, they call you out to be aggressive, then what do you do? So, I think that will not work. It is an impossible condition for peace. I still maintain that the only way to have peace is to make your enemies know that you're ready for war at any time.
Secretary Salvador Panelo.
My position would be, then as now, the President espouses this kind of foreign policy. We are friends to all and enemies to none. But if any of our friends assault our territorial integrity and sovereignty, then we become enemy of that friend of ours. Kailangan po, ang lahat ng mga tratado na papasukan natin ay kailangan palaging batay sa interes ng ating bansa. Hindi pwede na tayo'y magpapaloko, magpapabola, at mahihikaya tayong pumasok sa isang tratado na pagdating ng panahon ay pagsisisihan natin. Kailangan po pag-aralang mabuti. Pero gaya nga ng sinabi ng iba nating mga kasama, teka muna, non-aggression. Baka talian mo sarili mo dyan. Baka ikaw ang bitayin ng sinasabing kaibigan.
Thank you. And now all the candidates have answered. It's time for interpellation. Go ahead, Deputy Speaker Marcoleta.
Sinabi po ni Kadjes Aranza at ni Secretary Piñol na sila'y magdidesisyon lamang kung walang epekto ito dun sa arbitral decision. It is as if that decision has something to do with the question at hand. Ano po ba ang ibig niyong sabihin na dapat masettle doon sa decision? Ano po ba yung decision?
Go ahead, Mr. Aranza.
Yung pinanalo nating desisyon, siguro alam mo naman yun. Ang tanong ko lang, yung ba ay nakapending? Pero sinasabi natin na hamot nakapending yan habang kung anumang pagdating ng oras, babalikan. Pero kung yan ay alisin, anong bali walang pinaglalaban natin? Bali walang pinag-usapan natin? Ganun ho ba ang gusto natin?
Daphne, follow-up question on that.
Go ahead, Dr. Uy.
The question of Ms. Sass is actually if you will enter into non-aggression treaty with China, but the operative word there, I think, operative words there is, the specific is no, it's like asking you to commit that there should be no foreign military bases in the country. So if you will not ratify or you will not join that kind of alliance or agreement with China, would it mean as well, on the other hand, that you're open that, the country would have foreign military bases? Is that so? Because the question is, no foreign military bases in the country, which equates to non-aggression. That's what the question is all about. So now, since you said that, we don't want to do that because, it would compromise the sovereignty, national security of the country. Now, the question is, so would it mean that you're open, that the Philippines would have foreign military bases in the country in some ways? Or, to that extent? That's a question, no? That's just a question.
Okay, let's go back to Mr. Marcoleta. Go ahead.
That will complicate matters even more because our constitution prohibits the presence of foreign forces in our shore, and then of course we cannot barter our state policy that the state should pursue an independent foreign policy. We will not be able to maintain such neutrality or independent foreign policy if there is that kind of condition dangled to us.
Yes.
Okay. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Go ahead, ma'am. Ms. Pimentel.
Entering into a non-aggressive treaty with China actually puts us at an advantage because that is the time that we could already set our ground rules with them. We could always give them what we want as far as the relationship between China and the Philippines.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Belgica.
Simple as disarming yourself in front of an enemy that is armed against you. So, in the situation we don't have the military capabilities to fight China. And the posing threat, yung pag-withdrawin ka ng alisin mo yung mga arms mo, is already saying na surrender ka na sa akin. And if you don't surrender to me, then I will be aggressive to you. So we can't get into that kind of agreement.
Secretary Panelo and then Senator Honasan.
Regarding the concern of candidate Aranza, he says that the non-aggression treaty might affect the arbitral ruling. Let me say that the arbitral ruling cannot be diminished by anyone or by any force on earth. That is permanent. Whether they like it or not, we want it, and it will be there forever, like the Rock of Gibraltar.
Thank you, Senator Honasan.
The Philippines is 120 years old. When we deal with a country like China with a history of 5,000 to 8,000 years, we better be careful. And there is such a thing as diplomacy. The situation sometimes is, even before the terms of reference are clear, we broadcast ourselves over media, which puts both parties in a corner. We paint ourselves into a corner. So our foreign policy, our security policy, our economic policy is a function of our ability to enforce and leverage it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, candidates. Unfortunately, we are out of time. Before we go to our closing statement, I would like to announce to our audience to please watch out for the final round of the SMNI presidential debate on March 26, 2022 at Okada, Manila. Okay, so now we are headed to our final part of the debate, which is now the closing statement, and all of you will have 90 minutes.
Excuse me.
90?
Okay.
Sorry, 90 seconds. We don't want 90 minutes. Yeah, I'm gonna keep you all here for 90 minutes.
Kanina ko pa kasi.
Sige.
Dalawa lang ho. Gusto ko lang malaman, despite yung we are trying to entice foreign investors, I just want to be clarified by Mr. Diaz. What does he mean by economic emancipation? And to my friend, Congressman Marcoleta, ang tanong ko lang is, nabanggit mo tungkol dun sa Saba claim, kadidesisyon lang nung Sakuta Kinabalo nung 2020. Ang ibig bang sabihin, wala na tayong hope doon? Sa Constitution may nakalagay ata na in other areas. Baka doon tayo pumasok.
All right, let's go to Mr. Diaz and then Mr. Marcoleta.
By economic emancipation, what I mean is giving to the people what they are due. And that is the ability to rise above the misery and poverty that they are encountering right now. Sa akin pong palagay, ito po ay may isa sa katuparan sa pamamagitan po ng encouragement, motivation of the two kinds of investments, foreign direct investments and local investments. And by the proper supportive legislatures, this can happen because the Filipino is capable of rising above himself.
Thank you. Deputy Speaker Marcoleta.
Yung tanong po ni Kadjes, na-define na po kasi sa ating national territory na wala na po yung historic right or legal title. Kaya hindi po natin magagamit yon kahit na po anong sinasabi nating Kota Kinabalu. Yun pong food security kanina, may nagsabi, ano po ang pagkakaiba ng food security sa food sufficiency? Hindi po yata nasasagot yun. At pagkatapos nito, ay kailangan nating magkaroon ng pangwawakas pero hindi namin magawa sa loob lamang ng isang minuto. Napakahirap po yata ng aming kalagayan ngayon.
Okay, maraming salamat.
Can I respond to?
Maraming salamat. I'm sorry we are out of time. I wish I could give you more time. Maraming salamat sa ating mga candidates and our panelists. But before we go, I would like to give you 90 seconds each. Should you be elected as Senator of the Republic of the Philippines, what legacy will you bring to the Filipino people? Let's start with Senator Honasan, and we're going to go down the line here.
Sa aming mga kababayan, the Philippines is a blessed country. And our most precious resource are our next generation of citizens and leaders, our children. May kasabihan, we Filipinos, historically, we never miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity. So magkaisa tayo, magtulungan tayo. Saludo po ako sa inyo.
Maraming salamat. Senator J.V. Ejercito.
Noong 2013, noon ako'y unang inihaan ng sarili ko sa sambayanan. Ang sabi ko, gusto ko guminawa ang buhay ng sambayanan ng Pilipino. After 6 years of being in the Senate, I pursued programs and legislation that is designed really to uplift the living conditions of our people. I'm quite proud that I was able to pass 2 landmark laws, Universal Healthcare Act, which seeks to give access to good quality healthcare for all Filipinos, and the creation of the Department of Human Settlements or Housing, so that the housing program the housing program will further improve, so that there will be no more informal settlers in 30 to 40 years' time. Likewise, I push for infrastructure development, the railway system, the airport modernization, because as I've mentioned earlier, this will spread out the development to the countrysides, create growth development areas, and produce jobs and opportunities. Sa ating mga kababayan, marami na ho tayong ipasa, pero marami pa tayong dapat gawin. Kailangan po natin matutukan ang ito, ang Universal Healthcare Act. Sana ako'y hayaan yung tapusin ko ang implementasyon nito para mas lalong maramdaman ng sambayan ng Pilipino. Dapat po zero balance billing, lalong-lalo na senior citizens, indigents, may hirap, at lalong-lalo na ang PWDs. Ito'y work in progress, kaya nga isa sa mga rason kung bakit ako'y nagdesisyon na bumalik sa Senado upang matapos ang mga ito. Isa para sa kalusugan, isa para sa babahay, at syempre isa sa infrastruktura para po sa trabaho. At muli po ay ibalik po natin ang good sa Senado. Marami pa tayong gagawin at gagawin po natin. JBS po.
Thank you. Mr. Jess Aranza, your legacy.
Mahal kong kababayan, gagawin ko ang lahat upang maibalik natin ang sigla ng ekonomiya ng ating bansa na siyang solusyon sa mga paghihirap ngayon. Gagawin ko rin na matulungan ang ating mga magsasaka. Ang inaisip ko ay isang Pilipinas na walang mahirap, na sana masaya ang tao, pantay na pantay, ang hindi naman pantay ang income, but pareho-pareho silang nabibigayaan ng ating pong may kapal. Mahirap po sabihin ang lahat. Marami na akong nagawa sa pribadong sektor. 5 level cases ang naifile sa akin sa paghabol ko sa mga substandard at sa mga smuggled goods sa bansa natin. 250 billion ang hinahabol ko. Walang tumutulong sa akin, maski saan sa Kongreso. Kaya ako'y naghihinayang, kaya ako'y tumatakbo upang sa ganun, baka sakali may mandato ako, ay may ibigay ko sa tao kung anong dapat na ibibigay sa kanila. Salamat po sa inyo sa pakikinig, at ang kasabihan nun natin, ang ating bansa ay isang mayabong na bansa. Wala hong dahilan kung bakit tayo maging mahirap. Question lamang, patakbuhin natin. Ang industriya po ay siyang sinatawag na backbone of our economy. Gagawin po natin yan at gagawin nating masigasig at maligaya ang ating mga kababayang Pilipino. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you. Dr. Mengita Padilla.
First of all, salamat ng marami sa SMNI at sa nag-organize ito at sa mga panelists. Maraming salamat po. Ako po isang doktor na nagsilbi na sa bayan ng 34 years. Marami na akong nagawa sa pribadong sektor. Tumulong din ako sa gobyerno sa maraming paraan. Gusto ko makatulong pa sa mas malawak na paraan. At kung bibigyan niyo po ako ng pagkakataon, ito lang po ang masasabi ko. Anong legacy mabibigay ko sa inyo? Isang public servant ho, na lahat ho ng aking dedikasyon, karunungan, integridad na binigay ko sa pagiging doktor ay iaalay ko sa inyong lahat bilang inyong senador. Yun lang po masasabi ko sa inyo. And kalusugan, kabataan, pagkain, food security po, climate change, resiliency, hindi natin na pag-usapan. Lahat ho ito talagang ipupursige ko. And finally ho, I always tell people, buksan ho natin ang mata ng ating mga puso, doon lang natin makikita ang tunay na liwanag. Buksan natin ang mata natin ang ating isip, at turuan ho natin ang ating mga anak. Pumili ho tayo ng mga tapat, mga matalino, may alam at may pusong mga leader. Yun lang po ang aking hinihingi sa inyong lahat.
Thank you. Ms. Noor Mahal Kiram.
Iano ko po ang bill na i-recognize po ang Sultanate of Sulu. Bakit? Dahil mula po noon, nakalimutan na po natin ang kasaysayan natin. Diyan po nagmula ang gobyerno dati. Hayaan niyo po na magkaroon po ng boses ang Muslim. Dahil sa sobrang tagal na po, walang naging boses ang Muslim dito sa Senado natin. Mag-start nung pagkatapos ng term ni Santa Nina Rasul. Dito po, mapagbubuklod po natin, ibibigay po natin ang peace and development. Dahil po sa Sultanate, nung winala po nila ang Sultanate, dyan po nagkawatak-watak ang Muslim. At the same time, eto pong ating mga tribes, humihingi rin po ng boses dito sa Senado na para mabigyan naman po sila ng karapatan na pareho po ng dito po sa national. Ang Sultanate po ang makakatulong. Malaki po ang maitutulong namin sa inyo. Dahil po dito sa Sabah claim, nanalo na rin po kami sa arbitration. Ito po, malaki pong maitutulong namin dito sa gobyerno. Matagal na po namin pinapropose po yan.
Thank you very much. Mr. Ding Diaz.
Marami po ang mga suliranin na inaharap po ng ating mga kababayan. At ako po, nasabi ko nga sa isang panayam, ay hindi ako masyado nag-aalala sa pandemya dahil alam ko lilipas yan and we will learn to cope up with it. But I'm really more concerned about the economic repercussions that have been brought about by this pandemic and the crisis. You know, alam po natin marami po ang nagsara. However, what is a shimmer, glitter of light na nakikita ko po, yung resilience ng mga Pilipino. Nakikita po natin ang Pilipino, kahit po saan itapon, kaya po niyan lumutang, kaya po niyang maging magaling dahil po sa kanyang angking talino at galing. Ang Pilipino po, nakakalungkot lamang na pinapakinabangan. Kanina po nag-uusap po tayo about seafarers. Ito po ay katumbas na rin ng pagtatrabaho sa ibang bansa. Bakit po ang karaniwang Pilipino, para magkaroon ng pagkakataon ng mas magandang kinabukasan, kailangan po mga ibang bayan, sumakay po ng mga dayuhang barko upang mabigyan at magampanan ng kaganapan ang kanyang responsibilidad sa mga mahal sa buhay. Kung pwede naman po, dito na lang sana. Ang tanong po lagi ng aking mga pinupuntahan, sino si Ding Diaz? Si Ding Diaz po, isang karaniwang Pilipino. Walang maraming pinag-aralan, walang mga sikat na eskwelahan, ngunit handang gugulin ang anumang produktibong natitirang buhay, taon sa kanyang buhay para paglingkuran ng tapat ang karaniwang mamayan.
Thank you. Yusek Astra Pimentel.
Astra Pimentel po, lumalaban para sa pag-asa at para sa katatagan ng sambayanan. Ipagpapatuloy ang sinimulang pagbabago ng Pangulong Duterte sa pamamagitan ng pagiging boses ng ating mga overseas Filipinos at overseas Filipino workers. 12 million, more or less, are the Filipinos overseas. They need our protection. They need that we advance their welfare. Ang mundo po ay nababago ang istorya dahil sa mga Pilipinong nasa halos lahat ng bansa sa buong mundo. Magpapalakas sa lokal na pamahalaan sa pamamagitan ng pagsulong ng federalismo, sa pagsulong ng Magna Carta for barangay officials, at magtatayo ng dignidad ng ating mga kababaihan, kabataan at ng mga katutubo. Bilang isang Maranao, bilang isang Talaandig at bilang isang higaonon, nandito ako para bigyan ng pag-asa ang ating mga kababayang katutubo. Kung merong AstraZeneca na pag-asa at panlaban ninyo sa pandemya, merong Astra Pimentel, bakuna ninyo sa Senado.
Thank you. Secretary Manny Piñol.
Ako po si Manny Piñol, isang tunay na magsasaka na naniniwalang pwede tayong magkaroon ng sapat na pagkain. 30 million hectares, 36,289 coastline, lima sa pinakamahaba sa mundo, sapat na tubig. We can be food sufficient. But we have to correct some flaws in our legislations and policies. Number one, baguhin natin ang rice tariffication law. Pinapahirapan natin ang ating mga magsasaka na lalong nasasaktan sa mataas na presyo ng abono. Baguhin natin ang ating marketing system. Alam ninyo, as I speak, ang presyo ng tamban sa Zamboanga del Norte, 5 piso ang 1 kilo. Pwedeng dalhin sa Manila, pero sino magdadala? Government must come in and arrange the shipment of these goods from the production areas to the market. Kailangan din nating baguhin yung ating policy on importation. We have to return to the mountains and protect the forest. We have to conserve our water resources. We have to build roads, infrastructure. We have to support local industries. And most of all, kailangan natin ng isang bangko na totoong na magbibigay ng pautang sa mga magsasaka sa mababang interest. And lastly, we could start a nutrition-based food production program by legislation, and we have to institutionalize this para hindi pabago-bago ang ating programa kapag nagpalit ang ating Pangulo. Salamat po.
Secretary Greco Belhica.
Ako po si Greco Bellica, nagpatanggal ng pork barrel at DAP sa Supreme Court. At ako din po ang pinuno ng Presidential Anti-Corruption Commission, ang opisina na nilikha ng Pangulong Duterte para labanan ng kanyang labanan ng korupsyon. Sa akin pong termino, pinakamaraming sinibak, pinakamaraming kinasuhan, pinakamaraming kinulong, at pinakamaraming inimbestigahan ng opisina ng Pangulo dahil sa korupsyon. 154 cases po against high-ranking government officials ang aming sinampa, 800 pong government officials ang aming pinasibak ni Pangulong Duterte, 24 po ang aming pinakulong na government officials at 13,000 pong reports on corruption ang amin pong inaksyonan. Ito po ang trabahong pagpapatuloy ko sa Senado. Ang problema po, ngayon maraming sikat na kandidato, sikat na korap. At ang Pilipino po bumoboto ng korap basta sikat. Ibig pong sabihin, maraming mananalong korap. Mga kaibigan, kawawa po ang ating bayan. Pagpapatuloy ko po ang labang yan sa Senado at kung gusto po ninyo ng mas malakas na laban sa korupsyon, kaya ko po yun.
Thank you. Secretary Salvador Panelo.
Sa Senado, itutuloy ko po ang mga sinimulan ni Presidente Duterte, isang serbisyong malasakit at matapang. Susuportahan ko po ang mga batas sa build, laban sa droga, illegal na droga. At lahat po ng mga batas na magbibigay ng katugunan sa lahat ng pangangailangan ng mga kababayan natin, ang mangingisda, ang magsasaka, ang mga drivers, ang mga OFWs, ang mga ina ng tahanan, at lalong-lalo na ang mga senior citizens at mga PWDs, at higit sa lahat, ang mga special children na nangangailangan ng ating pagkalinga. Itutuloy po natin lahat yan. Susuportahan po natin ang sinumang mahalal na presidente. Kung ang presidenteng yan ay manghihikayat ng pagkakaisa at itutuloy ang mga reformang sinimulan ni Presidente Duterte. Ako po, si Sal Panalo sa balota, Salvador Sal Panalo, Panelo, number 50 sa balota. Meron po akong slogan. May slogan po ako, pakinggan niyo mga, Panelo, Panalo, Senado. Kay Panelo, kayo ay panalo. Salamat po.
Deputy Speaker Rodante Marcoleta. Okay, thank you very much.
Bibihira po ang nabibigyan ng pagkakataon makapagsilbi sa bansa at sa kanyang mamamayan. Ang isang senador po na may elect ng taong bayan ay kailangang wag niyang sirain at wag niyang sayangin ang pagtitiwalang ibinigay sa kanya. Ang senador po ay dalawa lamang ang kanyang gagawin, yung constituency function at saka yung legislative function. Ito pong legislative function ay nababahagi sa dalawa. ito po yung paggamit sa tinatawag nating formal inquiry na kung saan ay gagawin mo lamang para mag-legislate. At yung isa naman ay oversight function para sa ganon ay mahimay mo at makita mo kung paano ini-implement ang mga batas. Napakarami nating magagandang batas na hindi po na-implement. Katulad po ng EPIRA, hanggang ngayon, mataas pa rin po ang singil. Yun po ang ating public education, yung Republic Act 8487 ay nilabag po ng Department of Education. Hindi po kailangang mangyari ang mga ito. Magaganda po ang batas, ang senador po ay dapat gumawa ng mga bagay na maiaayos lahat natin ang magagandang batas na ginawa natin. Kailangan ng senador ay mag-iwan po ng magandang halimbawa kung anong kanyang tunay na gawain. Dante Marcoleta po, hindi sikat, ngunit maglilingkod ng tapat.
Thank you. Well, tonight definitely gave us a deeper understanding of the candidates' stand on certain issues. And we hope that after this series of SMNI senatorial debates, the Filipino people will really be able to decide on who to vote for this coming elections. And once again, we invite you all to please watch out for the final round of the SMNI presidential debate on March 26th, right here at Okada, Manila. Thank you again to all our candidates. Thank you so much for being here today. And thank you to the panelists, Dr. Carlos, Attorney Rolex, Dr. Uy, and Mr. Ang. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise. And thank you most of all to everyone who watched us tonight. It was a pleasure moderating this event. I am Daphne Osanya Paez. Have a good evening.
Maraming salamat, Daphne. Inyo pong natunghayan ang SMNI Senatorial Debate 2022. Naway naging sapat na gabay ang debate ito para sa inyong tamang pagpili ngayong eleksyon.
Sa muli, maraming salamat, Pastor Apollo C. Kibuloy, sa pagkakataon na maging kabahagi ng SMNI Senatorial Debate na ito. Malaking tulong po ang platapormang ito sa pagtataas ng kamalayan ng bawat Pilipinong boboto ngayong darating na halalan.
Sa mga matatapang na kandidato, maraming salamat sa inyong pagdalo upang ibahagi ang inyong mga plano na maaaring magpapatuloy sa pagbabagong nasimulan.
Ito po ang SMNI, kung saan laging ihahatid ang impormasyong tama, panig sa katotohanan at hindi magtataksil sa bayan.
Dahil ang SMNI ang totoong boses ng bayan, maraming salamat po sa inyong pagsubaybay.
Abangan sa Marso 26 ang Part 2 ng SMNI Presidential Debate at muli nating tunghayan ang pagharap ng mga nagnanais tumangan sa pinakamataas na posisyon sa pamahalaan, ang susunod na Pangulo ng ating bansa. Ako si Angel Pastor.
At ako naman si Troy Gomez. Ito ang SMNI Senatorial Debate 2022. Mabuhay ang Pilipinas kong mahal!
Matatamis na sinisulong at walang takot sa pagtundina sa maling ideolohiya ng terorismo sa ulang dekada nagdaan. Ngayon lang tayo namulat na maihayag kanilang mga kasinungalingan. Naliwanagan na ang mga Pilipino, alam na ngayon ang buong kwento. Ito ang programang walang pinapanigan. Ang katotohanan ay naboses ng mamamayan. Hatid sa inyo ang laban kasama ang bayan. Sama-sama abutin ang kapayapaan. Subuin ang tunay na panlaban. Hindi ka nag-iisa. Kami ay iyong kasama'y paglalaban ang karapatan ng mga Pilipino. Pag-ibig sa bayan ay di matutumbasan ng anumang bagay. Buhay ay iaalay hanggang sa huling hininga. Kayo ay pagsisilbihan. Ito ang programang walang pinapanigan. Ang katotohanan ay naboses ng mamamayan. Hatid sa inyo ang laban kasama ang bayan. Sama-sama abutin ang kapayapaan. Subuin ang tunay na kalaban. Hindi ka nag-iisa. Kami ay iyong kasama'y paglalaban ang karapatan ng bawat Pilipino. Laban kasama ang bayan. Sama-sama abutin ang kapayapaan. Subukin ang tunay na kalaban. Hindi ka nag-iisa. Kami ay iyong kasama'y paglalaban.
Subscribe to SMNI News Channel and turn on notification button for more news updates.